Today we will learn how to create dynamic chart using slicers. So we want to filter information that is on the chart. So we can choose a year, a country, so an element from a field, a column. We can choose quarters, and we even can choose group numbers, group information. So how can we do it such a chart in Excel? First of all, we need our data, and in this data we have only 4 columns. Is enough for this example. The most important is the date column. So we have a date, but we don't have year, quarter, and months column, but we'll fix it in pivot table. And we have also weight, so the column with numbers, and we'll group those numbers because it's too many to show them on the slicer. Okay, so we can just select one cell in this data, go to Insert tab and Pivot Table. And in this window for Pivot Table, we just need to make sure that range is correct, and we want our Pivot Table on the new worksheet. So let's press OK. We need enough space for our chart and slicers. Okay, so we will start with a date column. So we have our pivot table field window, and we are just dragging date column to the rows. Okay, so this is our rows, and we can see that in the newer version of Excel automatically groups our dates. But one more thing, on the Design tab, I will change Report Layout to show in tabular form. Thanks to that, it's more clear that I have years, quarters, months, and single day from the date column. And if your Excel didn't do this grouping automatically, it's very simple. We just need to right click any of a date in pivot table. So right click and group option, and we can see grouping window. We have a start at and the end at, and we can see that our end is on the 1st of January 2026, but we don't have exactly this date. The last date we have is 31st of December 2025, and this will be a small problem for us later, but we'll fix it. Okay, but the most important here is months, quarters, and years, and we want to select all of them, and I can just press OK now, and I will get a bit different results in our example. So we have grouped the fields, and in my example I have still the shortcuts for months from Poland, so I can change this if I have to, just writing the proper shortcuts for country I'm from if something with Windows went wrong and is using different language underneath. If something isn't changed, I can change it manually. And I want also change the headers, because those headers have inside them also the date column, so the column name from which we start the grouping. So I want to change those names column. So just select header, write new name or F2, and we can delete some information, and we get a proper names we want to change, extract this. Okay, and I have changed one month, but we can also change all of them, and I can even shorter the quarters. So I can write, for example, Q1, not qtr1 2. And when I have all grouping and names of the groups like I like to, I can just uncheck those checkboxes or just drag this field, this column outside of area or in pivot table. Okay, so now I have 3 additional columns that I can use in my pivot table and in the slicers. Okay, and I want one more column, one more grouping with weight. So once again, weight, we are dragging weight to rows, column, headers, and we have numbers, many numbers, too much for a slicer. So what can we do? One solution, if we want custom groups, width of the groups, we can select proper the numbers we want, and then right click and group this field. Then when we click here group, we will get one more column and weight 2, and in this field we will get different groups. We can of course change these groups names, but we will get only one group for the selected field element cells, and we need to manually select other ranges, other values, and group them manually. So it's more work, but we'll get in this way custom groups, not the groups with the same width. Okay, but for this example I will prefer to get simple groups. So let's ungroup this field. So we have weight 2 column, and when I ungroup this data I will only get weight column, only one weight column. And now I need to select only one cell, right click it, and then group it, and we'll get a simple grouping window for these numbers. And we have a starting at and ending, and so the smallest value is 5. I would like to change it to 0, and when I change this value, start or end, to the new value that isn't the actual start or end, the checkbox will be unchecked. When we click it again, it will be checked, and we will get the actual smallest on the largest value from this field, the number that find Excel in our data. And the field by, I want my groups to be wider, so 200s, and I can just press OK, and I have those groups. And we can also change the names for those groups. Just select the cells and write different value. Okay, so we grouped all our informations we want. Now we want to weight, drag to also values. You can see we have count of weight, but I want sum, because of this grouping weight columns change from default sum to count. So let's right click and summarize value by sum, not the count. So sum these values, we don't need weight on the rows headers, so let's drag it out from pivot table. I want country as column headers, and I want product names as rows headers. Okay, and it's our pivot table, but we want a pivot chart. So we can go on the pivot table analyze and click pivot chart here, and we can choose our pivot chart, or we can also go on the insert tab and we can work with recommended chart, but we will go at all charts unfortunately for pivot table, but we can see that all charts that are available for pivot table, and we can see that some charts aren't available for the pivot table. So we just need column, clustered column chart and press OK. We have our chart and we can now work with this chart to add slicers. And we can add slicers from pivot chart. So I have selected pivot chart, and on pivot chart analyze tab I can insert slicers. I can also select one cell in pivot table, and on the pivot table analyze I can also insert slicers, because pivot table is connected to pivot chart and pivot chart is connected to pivot table. It doesn't matter from where we will insert the slicers. Okay, so I don't want date, I want quarter and year. I want weight, yes, only one field for weight, because we will be using not the custom groups but default groups, standard grouping options. And I will also want to add country. Okay, I can press OK, and I have add 4 slicers. And because sometimes Excel has a problem with especially dates, we will see those strange numbers that don't actually appear, dates that don't actually appear in our data. So we want to hide them. To hide them, just right click, pivot on the slicer and slicer settings, and hide items with no data, and we won't see those information. And I can select, holding Control, more than 1 slicers, and on the slicer, for example, on the slicer tab I can choose slicer settings, the same as from the drop-down menu, and choose hide items with no data. This time this will work for 2 of our slicers, and we have our slicers, and we can change especially different settings. Let's count this be this color, so styles for this, and we want just different colors, so let's make them different for this example. And we can also change the size of the slicer, and to be more precise we can go on the slicer tab and we can choose here the height and the width of the slicer. Also for the buttons we can see on those slicers. Okay, now I'm working with quarters, and we also can change the number of columns. Okay, this quarter is definitely too small about this height. Okay, this is enough change. We can just check what size works correctly for us to see proper information. So for year we want 3 columns. This look nice in such a way. Country, different colors, different numbers of columns depending on the slicer. And for the quarter I get one Q1 and QTR shortcut for the other quarters. And if I want to change it, I still can. I just need to drag a quarter field for a short period of time to our pivot table, and I can change here Q2, Q3 and Q4. Okay, and I don't need quarter in my pivot table, so I don't need it also on my pivot chart. And now I have prepared all things, so I can now filter my data. So okay, I can choose, for example, France, year 2023, and just first quarter. Or I can hold Control and select fields that aren't in the from sorted, so in the different just any button element from the slicer. I can select those values. I can clear filter, just clicking this this button, and I can also just holding Control, select all elements again, and we'll have the same results. Now we have really dynamic chart, and also because chart is connected to pivot table, we have dynamic pivot table information about our data.